How are you guys this morning? Good. It's a beautiful morning. I got to drive in last night and the snow wasn't too bad. Jamie and I just bought a house in Vermilion, so really excited. We're actually right across the street from the school on Dakota Street, so it's within sight. The bad part was we had to move yesterday, so we got to experience a little bit of snow, some pretty wet furniture, so we got to vacuum that out, but we made it. So I'll give you a little update on USD Chi Alpha, Go Yotes, right? The first time I was here, so I moved here from Missouri, and in Missouri, the only real coyote that I knew was Wile E. Coyote, right? And how do you say Wile E. Coyote, right? So the first time I was here, I about got crucified by Phil, because I said, go Yotes, and he didn't like that at all. So I've learned, go Yotes. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the ministry started. We've been officially recognized on campus as an organization. That just happened about a month ago. Oftentimes it's difficult to get approval to be on campus because our leadership within our campus organization requires you to be a Christian. And oftentimes that is seen as discriminatory. So many of the campuses, the campus pastors that I know have really struggled, had to get lawyers involved to get recognized on campus because of this term of being a Christian to be a leader. At USD, we met on a Saturday night with our student president. We got all of we needed 5 members. So we got all those people together. We got everyone signed up. Monday morning, I got a response back that we were accepted. So literally Saturday night to Monday morning. That's unheard of. Just God's favor has really gone before us. We've got to start ministering to students. Even before we were recognized on campus, we can still hang out with people, right? Have coffee. I like to cook, so students are always at our house eating. Usually, I tell people I'm smoking meat. I always have to say smoking meat. We're not just smoking together. We're smoking ribs or something, so they come over. The 3 of these girls here are girls that Jamie's been meeting with. They came and did a craft and built wreaths one night. This is Bernard. He's from Nigeria. Actually, the first week of school, on Friday, just before school started on Monday, I went to Walmart. I needed milk and some cereal or something. I eat Cheerios for breakfast every morning because I'm weird. And I was out, so I went to get this stuff, and I was walking down the aisle, and I saw this guy, Bernard, looking completely lost. And he was standing in front of, I'm not sure if it was granola bars at the time, something, and I just walked by, and he just looked lost. So I walked up to him and said, hey, is there any way I could help you? And he's like, how do I pick? He's like, I'm used to having one choice. If I want milk, I go get milk because there's just milk. And now there's all these options, and he just really, really needed that help. So I got to engage with him then, and we've continued that relationship on. The girl on the left here is actually our student president. So her name's Lauren, LD. She's a theater major, and she loves Jesus. And obviously, Eva has been. Actually, Bernard Eva was about 3 days old there. So he was the first student. Yep, to hold our daughter. It was really cool. Ministry development. I've been trying to grow personally. I think every leader, if you stop growing, you're dead. Or you should be. So I've been trying to, if you want to switch slides, I've been personally involved in a cohort. So there are 6 campus pastors, this picture on the left up here. There are 6 of us that are planning Chi Alphas across the nation this year and that are in this program. And so each of us are networking, learning from each other. When I mess something up, I tell them. And when they mess something up, they tell me. And we really have had an opportunity to learn from one another through this new director training that we've been a part of. I'm actually now representing the state as far as Chi Alpha is concerned. So I'm now the district director for the state. And what that looks like is recruiting people to reach other campuses. Our dream is that all the 4-year schools in the state would have a Chi Alpha there that's there to teach students about the love of Christ, to reach out to them and engage them. So that's a part of what I'm doing here. I was at a training actually in St. Louis about a little over a month ago, learning about how to recruit teams, how to educate them, how to pastor them well, so that the ministry will be there for the long haul. This picture on the bottom, you guys were a part of, your youth, I'm sure. If you've ever heard of Speed the Light. Speed the Light is something that youth raise money and they resource missionaries so that they can do their job better. And that truck I picked up in Springfield in January. So the youth of South Dakota raised the money for us to be able to have that truck so that we can move students in and out. So I've moved two so far, pulled a trailer and helped them move out, different housing or whatever, just a way to serve them. Also, it helps pulling trailers. We'll be doing retreats and things like that, and I'll need to be able to mobilize equipment. So thank you to your youth very much. And oftentimes people hear Speed the Light and they think it's a great thing, but they never see anyone who's actually impacted by it. So here I am. I drove that truck here this weekend. So let's go to the next slide. This is our little girl. She's all cheeks. Really, really special to be a dad. I'm 37 years old. I figured out that I might be older than ideal. I was used to sleep. My back, I was in a wreck a few years ago, and she weighs 13 pounds now, and I can hold her on one side for a while, and then my back hurts, and then I switch, or I hold her in the middle. What a little bundle of joy. We're so glad that we've been blessed with her. A little bit about the birth. It wasn't good. So my wife is a very small lady. Last time we were here, she preached. So you heard the A-team then. Now I'm preaching. So, but she's a very, very small lady. And Eva was actually just 6 pounds. But after about 4 hours of active labor and pushing, it wasn't going to happen. So the baby was getting stressed. So they decided to do a C-section. And during the C-section, so they pulled the baby out. She's not breathing at all and not reacting to what they're trying to do. So on the table behind me, they are trying to revive my daughter. And while they're doing that, I hear the doctor from behind the curtain say, "Oh, I can't fix that." So I'm standing here, or sitting next to my wife's head, and I hear him say that about her. They're trying to revive my daughter. It put a new perspective on God's love for us. It really, really did. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Luke 15. I think you've probably all heard these parables before. Switch slides here. It'll be the parable of the lost sheep is the first part of Luke 15, right? Parable perspectives is the title. If you need one, I usually don't use one, but really what we're doing is looking at two different perspectives on these parables. The one that we typically look at, which the scripture is broken down by the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son, right? And then we're going to look at the other side of that as well. So I'm going to read from Luke 15. Now the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulder and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I found my lost sheep.' I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons that do not repent." So whenever I read the story about the lost sheep, what I think of is my dad's friend. His name is Ricky. He's about 2 years younger than my father. And if you saw him, my dad's 62, right? Yeah, 62. He'll be 63 in April. So this guy's about 60. And if you saw him, you would think he was probably 90. He's been a meth addict for many years of his life. Whenever I see the lost sheep, I think of addiction. These people who who are unable to return to the fold that they want to because they're too injured to get back. My dad invested a lot of time in Ricky and helped him along the way. He went through a recovery program, was doing very well, fell back off the wagon. I haven't seen him in a few years now even. Whenever I think of the lost sheep, I think of someone who is so injured that they can't get back even though they want to. Parable of the lost coin, we'll go to it. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she does, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I've found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels, the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Whenever I hear the parable of the lost coin, I think of something that is lost and doesn't even realize it. The coin doesn't know that it's lost, right? It is, but he doesn't know it. While I was ministering in Colorado last year, I was doing an internship. And the first week, we had move-in day. And I was volunteering to help at move-in day, meeting freshman students. And I met a young man who, I'm not going to say his name in case someone watches this, but I met a young man who literally did not know who Jesus was. He'd heard the name, but he didn't know him. He was a kid from California, had a great heart, had been raised well, but he literally did not know that he was lost and had no idea who Jesus was. It really challenged me. And now, the farther we get into what I would call, especially where I am on the college campus, I would call it post-Christian, we see so many students who just don't know anything about where morality came from or Christ. So that's what I think of when I think of the lost coin, is that guy who just doesn't even know he's lost. The parable of the lost son, I think we all know this one, the lost son, the prodigal son. It depends on which version you're reading. But guy's got two sons. The younger one says to his father, "Give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. After he spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out as a citizen of that country, who sent him out to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "My father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But when he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, throwing his arms around him and kissed him." So this story reminds me of me, which is, it's hard thinking that was my dad, searching, praying for my soul whenever I walked away from him for so many years. I got to college and I had no friends there other than I was on the baseball team. I was a pretty good baseball player, played third base. Really loved it, but literally it was like a fraternity. And a few years, by my junior year, I started drinking, and I couldn't control it. So I went down and down and down for about it was about 8 years before I came back to Christ. So when I think of the prodigal son, I think of me. But I'm sure that there are a lot of you that can think of someone who knows the way and has walked away from it of their own accord. So whenever I read these scriptures, I usually read a scripture and then I try to ask myself a question about it. So in this instance, for these scriptures, the context that I used was Luke 14. So if you look back at Luke 14, which I'm not going to have these on the screen, it talks about Jesus. Jesus is at a Pharisee's house. And while he's at the Pharisee's house, he actually heals a man who was unnaturally swollen. It happened to be on the Sabbath. So you can imagine that was a decision that Jesus made that was difficult. to do that in a Pharisee's house on the Sabbath, knowing what that was going to cause him. It was going to cause grief. It was going to cause him pain in the end. The next parable in Luke 14 is about a great banquet where the master is desperate to draw as many people as he possibly can to himself. So he asks for his friends to come, and everyone refuses him. So he sends out his servant again and says, invite everyone from the highways and byways, the beggars, the people who are diseased, whoever, to come. And still they couldn't fill the house. So eventually they do, but they get everyone from the highways and byways, and he's so desperate to fill his house with the people. The third part of chapter 14 is the cost of being a disciple. Jesus talks about, and this one's tough, right? If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. How does Jesus always, like the difficult things, it seems like that's what he was always doing, was the hard stuff. It's so hard for me to wrap my mind around having that kind of drive to always do the hard thing. The guy that sits next to you at work, is it hard to talk to them about Jesus? I know it was for me whenever I was working in that field, but I think that's what Jesus would have done. So the question that comes to me reading through through chapter 14 is why does Jesus always do the difficult thing? Why does he always dig deep into himself and do the right thing? Christ pursues people in such a personal way because he actually understands the suffering of the Father. So to answer my question, I think Jesus sat next to his Father before he came back here to save us. And he saw the pain on the Father's face over the people who didn't know him on this earth. So each one of these parables, I think, really reflects on the place the Father was. And that's a place of suffering. So the lost sheep, let's look at that from the other side. The shepherd picked up that sheep and brought it back. I think that was probably some suffering. If I was a few years younger, I told you I'm 37, a sheep weighs 150 to 200 pounds. Can you imagine having a lost sheep in the middle of the desert and walking out and finding him wherever that sheep might be, let's say a half mile from the flock, and putting the sheep on your shoulders and carrying him back? I mean, that would be painful for me, I know, and it would be suffering. The lost coin, the woman is desperate to find this lost coin. I think it was about a week's wages. So, I mean, it's a significant amount of money that she's lost, and she's desperate to find it. The prodigal son, obviously that was the father. The father is desperate to get to his son. The father is the one that was suffering in this story. So I think we can see both sides of the parables, and they're both accurate. But really, I think the pain of the father is the motivating factor for me. I've had a change of heart over the last probably 6 years. I used to go to a church in Springfield, Missouri, and during a Vision Sunday service, they gave us a printout, basically, of things they wanted us to pray for over the next year, things they prayed that the church would be able to do, things that we were dreaming of. And one of the things on there really changed my heart. I was working a secular job at the time. I was a project manager at a large construction company, so I get up early every morning. I'm driving to work at 5:30, and I had those things on top of my visor. So on my drive, it was about 30 minutes, I would pray through the things on that visor. Thankfully, I didn't get caught reading those while I was driving. But I would pray through these items. And one of the items on there is what I would challenge you guys with today. So really, it's a question that I always ask at the end of a message, and is, so what? I mean, we talk about all these things, but really we have to get down to what is the action that this should cause us to take. So the so what in this is, for me, was the item on that list that I prayed through. And that was just that. God would break my heart for what breaks his. And after praying that every day for a year, I would call that, actually someone recently preached this who's very famous, and I feel like I came up with it first, but it's a very dangerous prayer, and that is, God break my heart for what breaks yours. Craig Rochelle actually preached it recently at Life Church, and break my heart for what breaks yours. And as I prayed that over and over, I was the tough guy. I can't remember ever crying before I started praying this prayer whenever I prayed. But the more I prayed this prayer, and I started to really feel the heart that Jesus had for the people who are lost. And now on my campus, I see people who don't know Jesus, who are living a lifestyle that they have justified, or a lifestyle that they just don't know that isn't right. And it literally breaks my heart. I tell people, I laugh, I call them liquid prayers. I pray a lot, and now I do cry a lot, and that was embarrassing to me for a long time. But I've found that it's just the heart of the Father. His heart breaks for those people around us. So, what I want to ask you guys is, who are the people in your life that your heart is breaking for? My challenge is, I know you guys are in this season of plus one, of growing the church. Church is doing so well that you need to split into 2 services. What that means is you've got room to invite people. And the challenge that I put out to you guys is pray that prayer if you're ready for the consequences. Because the consequences of a prayer like that, every day, there's a point in the day where I feel the weight of the burden that God's put on my heart. Every day there's a time where it's not easy to just go on with my life. Like I have to pray, and I have to cry for these people that I love, because that's the heart of God. So that's not everyone is going to be ready to do this, because I'm telling you, it is painful, and it is exactly what Christ wants from us. He wants us to understand how much he loves those around us. So that's something, that's my challenge to you guys. Not everyone wants to do that maybe, but I would ask you guys, if you want to stand up, they're going to play a little music, and then also I want to extend an invitation. There's these tears that I've got on my face are not just for the people who break my heart that I know. They might be for someone in this room who doesn't know Jesus. That's the motivating factor in what we do in my life is that you would know Jesus, that you would understand how much he loves you and desires to be your king, and your comfort in a time of difficulty. So if any of you have a desire to invite Jesus into your heart, I would ask that you come talk to one of us, or catch me after service if you don't want to do it now, but it's the best decision you can ever make.